This is episode 13 with Maggie Wilde. Your challenges don't define you. However, how you choose to handle them does. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Laugh at Adversity podcast. I'm your host, Gary Savoy. Having overcome medical trauma, I've made it my mission to uncover all of the secrets to overcoming life's challenges and living a better life. Each week, I will bring you an inspiring person or message. You'll hear from some of the most inspirational people on this planet, including those who have overcome adversity firsthand. My goal is to provide you with everything you need to conquer your challenges and to turn your struggles into strengths. Maggie Wilde is known as the Potentialist, where she specializes in uncovering her clients' untapped potential. As someone who battled her inner critic growing up, struggled with overeating, and even overcame a stroke at age 40, Maggie fully understands what it takes to regain control of unhelpful habits, beliefs, behaviors, and emotions that have been holding you back. Maggie is a Master Clinical Hypnotherapist, an NLP Master Practitioner, and a confidence coach and counselor. Maggie's hope is that through the skills and secrets that she teaches, that she can help you tap into your potential of your own mind and create the life of your dreams too. In this episode, we discuss why others saw potential in her even when she couldn't, and how she redefined her belief system after her stroke. We also discuss her 3-part model to rewire your neural pathways and how you can rewire your belief system through repetition. Maggie and I also go into the scientific process behind changing our thoughts and how we can handle emotional eating. 2 very important takeaways that I found from this interview are that our brain is always learning and growing even after we reach adulthood, and also that it only takes 68 seconds to change our thinking. So without further ado, here's my interview with Maggie Wilde. Hi, Maggie. Welcome to the Laugh at Adversity podcast. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you for having me, Gary. Great to be here.
So I know it's early morning over there in Australia?
That's correct. 9 a.m. Not too early.
Thank you for being here. So I'd like to, I connected with you on Instagram. I was kind of taken aback by everything that you kind of had put on there. And then I got to your website and I saw some of your interviews, and I'd like to have you share a little bit about your background, how you kind of got into hypnotherapy and why you call yourself a potentialist, and kind of the path that got you there.
Sure. The path that got me there was really me being a messed up cheeky baby, really. I was very depressed in my teens, quite suicidal actually in my 20s. I'd been diagnosed with multiple autoimmune diseases at 21. And at 21, you think, you're a magic bullet and you can just deal with anything. And so I did the usual head in the sand and ran away and traveled the world and did backpacking and pretended it wasn't there and didn't deal with it at all. So I'd been hospitalized numerous times from my late teens to early 20s, and that's how it was originally diagnosed. And it was just too big for me to deal with because I was so emotionally unstable as well that I kind of put my head in the sand and ran away. And there were many wake-up calls in my 20s and 30s. In my 20s, I prayed my 30s would get better. In my 30s, I prayed my 40s would get, and it just kept snowballing until at the age of 39, my brain and body just gave up completely, and I had a massive stroke and had to be resuscitated numerous times in that one day. And for me, I was already a therapist at the time. I'd studied psychology to try and work out, not really to be a therapist, I wanted to work out what was wrong with me.
Right.
And it gave me a lot of tools that kind of helped me work out why I was like I was, but it didn't give me any strategies to actually fix it. And so it wasn't really until I began studying neuroscience, the brain, how it works, hypnosis and how the brain learns. And hypnosis is one of those tools that helps the brain learn. It's one strategy that puts the brain into a learning state. So for me, it was about using as many tools, drawing upon as many strategies and therapeutic models that could help me understand how to fix what was going on in my head. And then when I did have the stroke, I had to really learn how to walk and talk again. I had to learn, even reteach my body how to digest food and start from scratch. There was a point in the early days after the stroke where I would eat anything with really high enzymes like a strawberry or a mango, and I would have a seizure. So my body had to relearn. It was kind of like a complete rebirth.
Wow. So when you talked about your earlier days, was it heavy depression and anxiety that you were kind of struggling with, or was it something else?
Yes, there was a bit of a traumatic background, and so I'd grown up not liking who I was, grown up with a very, very major inner critic that didn't like me, didn't like my body. I'd always, as part of the disease, I later learned I'd always struggled with weight, so I was always gaining and losing weight. My body was always different to everybody else's. I was very intelligent and could put my mind to so many different things, but there was so much going in my mind, the focus was very hard to maintain. And so I kind of learned just to shut down who I was and follow the rules of life, basically. Because I was good at things naturally, I was always asked to join. I was asked to take on a scholarship to do theatre and phonetics and speech therapy. And so, I was put in these Eisteddfods as a child and put on show when I was winning awards and doing all of those things. But inside, I was just eating myself alive. I was an emotional eater. I was stressed. I was a secret eater. I was belittling my body when I looked in the mirror all the time and putting myself down. And I just didn't believe in myself. And it was in my last year of school, I'd been asked by my drama teacher to direct and star in the final year production. And there was a director of a theatre and education team who was in the audience. And he asked me to audition for their theatre troupe. And I ended up getting a role as an actress in that theatre troupe and left school to travel with the theatre troupe around Australia. And that was kind of my introduction to the world. And I was always confused about why people saw something in me. I was always confused and questioned what it was that people saw. And there was part of me that desperately hoped that what people were seeing was real, but I couldn't yet believe it. And the director of the theatre company that I traveled with for about 4 years, he kept saying to me, I just don't understand, Maggie, why you're so insecure, why you just don't believe in yourself. You've got such talent, you've got such possibilities, your potential is huge. And he saw my potential way back then when I was 18, and I couldn't believe in it. And that's really why I ended up taking on the brand, if you like, of the Potentialist, because I held on to for nearly 3 decades the belief that he saw something in me that was bigger than I saw, and that went beyond my body. It went beyond my skills. It went beyond my talents. It was a heart thing. He saw the real me, the soul inside me. And it had resonated with me all my teens and into my 20s, even through the depression. I just hoped that what he saw was real, and I just kept pushing. I think that's what kept me pushing to get better and to keep studying and keep learning how to fix what was wrong, because I just believed him and loved him so much and trusted him so much that if he saw it, it had to be there.
Right.
And so now I've taken on that identity, if you like. I believe it's kind of like a pay it forward. I have learned to tap into that potential to experience it and live it myself. And so for me, it emotionally, and it still kind of brings that emotion forward for me as well, as you can tell by my voice. For me, it's about tapping into and seeing the potential in others and holding that for them until they can believe in themselves, and showing them the tools that I wish I'd had when I was 18 and 20 and 25. I wish I'd had some real strategies, easy strategies to switch my messy brain off and find some space in my brain to reprogram a new belief about myself, a new dream and vision for myself, and a hope that was deeper than a hope, that was a reality. And so I hold that vision for others now when I, see somebody come into my clinic, or I'm treating people on Skype or on webinars. For me, I can feel what's going on for them. I can feel their pain. I can feel their self-doubt. I can feel their hopes and their joys and their wishes for a better way. And I hold that potential for them and teach them how to see it in themselves. Only they can see it in themselves far faster than it. For me, I was a slow learner. It took me 3 decades.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how it goes. But it's amazing that you can, obviously relate to these people because you struggled and you were in their situation, 20 years ago.
Yes, absolutely. Even 12, 14 years ago than when I had the stroke. It's been, I think, 12 years since the stroke now. And it's really taken that 12 years. I kind of think of myself as 12 years old because I was reborn. It was like I had to rebuild everything after the stroke.
So let's talk about the stroke and being reborn because, I feel like when people have strokes, there's a lot of other health limitations that they might have, but somehow you were able to cultivate a mindset and start to do some investigative work and kind of change your beliefs and rewire your brain. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. Certainly, if I think about, I have this tool that I teach people in some of my workshops about asking themselves what kind of person do they believe they are. So what kind of person do you think you are? What kind of habits do you think that define you? What kind of emotions define you and reactions define you? And I used to think of myself as somebody that was always going to be depressed, somebody that was always going to be overweight, somebody that was always going to have to pretend through life. And that was the belief system that I had. And I'd thought of myself as a good performer because I'd learned through my teens and 20s how to perform, how to act beyond what was really going on for me and hide it from other people. And so I believed, grown up with all of these beliefs around who I thought I was. And one of the first things that I work with people and certainly had to do for myself after the stroke was redefine what those belief systems were. And every time learn strategies that every time my inner critic or the doubting part of me, if I was trying to learn how to think of myself as somebody that was healthy, and somebody that loved and accepted themselves and their body, my inner critic would pipe in and go, no, you're not, because yesterday you did this, or last year you sabotaged yourself, or 2 years ago this happened. And so that wiring in my brain was always trying to remind me of why I wasn't this new defined individual. And so for me, I needed to learn strategies of how to switch that inner critic off so that I knew the principles of wiring the brain. I knew the principles of bypassing damaged parts of the brain, of parts of the brain that weren't working the way you wanted to have them work in your life, or that were sabotaging you in some way. And so I knew that I needed to learn skills to switch off that inner critic, to give me the chance to rewire till I could believe beyond a shadow of a doubt in every cell of my being that I was the kind of person that can be healthy, the kind of person that loves and accepts myself and likes who I see in the mirror. And that's what I hope for others now. That's the potential that I hold for others.
And one of those strategies is hypnotherapy, right?
Hypnotherapy is kind of like one of the base models. That's why I did define myself as the potentialist rather than a hypnotherapist, because I use hypnosis as one of the strategies within my brain training model. I have a brain training model for switching off what doesn't work, which I call the control mechanism, and it targets the specific area of the brain at the cortex on the outer surface of the brain where all our unhelpful thinking is happening. So if we've got all these conscious thoughts that are I'm useless, I'm hopeless, I'm too this, I'm not good enough here, then if we can learn tools that quickly switch off that unhelpful thinking pattern at the core, at the surface of the brain, then that gives us the few seconds we need to use what I call the hypnotherapeutic tools to program, which is the second part of my CPR model, programming, the drug dealer part of the brain, the limbic system that's producing all of the neurochemicals that's making us feel the way we do, and to program that part for a better neurochemical response to the stressors or to the triggers that we normally have in life. And the third part of my model is the rewire part. So it's control what we don't want, what's not working for us, program what we want instead, a better reaction to stress, and rewire that permanently. So rewire our new belief systems, rewire our new reactions to stress, our new thinking patterns, our new definition, the map of who we think we are, our new blueprint. And that's targeting the reptilian part of the brain, which is at the cerebellum, the back of the brain there, which is the oldest part of the brain that keeps us alive and breathing. And it's the part that's stimulating the stress response to old triggers. And when we are training those three different parts of the brain using that model, we can switch off what's not working, program what we want instead, a better emotional response, and rewire that permanently through repetition so that we get a new belief system that we can believe in the cells of our being as true.
So how do you do that? How do you interrupt the cravings or the addictions?
Very, very simple little techniques, as well as some audio programs. So I have CPR kits that people use, brain training kits, as well as little 5-second, 10-second, 20-second techniques that people can do to give them the breathing space of 3 to 5 seconds to have a different thought. I'll give you some demonstrations of a couple of those that people can do instantly without having to go and listen to a hypnosis audio or listen to anything else. Some of them are, if you know of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, so they're called pattern interruptions. Mm-hmm. So they're my variations on techniques like that. And some of them are simple tools that we can do with our eyes. So if we use what I call the pattern interruption, which is to blink 3 times very slowly, and then roll the eyes in a circle one way very slowly so that you ensure you get a full 360 circle, and roll the eyes back the other way, then whatever you were thinking prior to that, you will actually have a few seconds of blank space in your brain. It's kind of like a quiet spot in your brain where you can't hold the same thought. So if you think about it now, if you think about something you normally say to yourself that's not particularly helpful, or if there's a particular craving that you have for foods that have become unhelpful to you by like excess chocolates or breads or sweets or carbs, okay? If you think about something that isn't helpful to you right now and try and conjure up the memory of it or the thought process of it, notice where the thought or the urge or the craving comes from in your body or your head, and just slowly blink 3 times, roll your eyes in a circle one way, very slowly. If you don't get a full circle or if you feel like you get stuck somewhere, start again and just slow the process down and roll the eyes back the other way. And then if you try and hold that thought again, try and conjure it up. It takes a few seconds for it to kick in, if indeed it can kick in. Or if it does kick in, it's kind of like you're a little bit distanced from it. There's no emotional or chemical reaction to it anymore.
Yeah, it does. I just tried it.
Yeah. So that's what I would call one of the, there's about 30 different control techniques that I teach. But that's one control technique that gives somebody, if they're going down the chocolate aisle at the supermarket and the dark chocolate's on sale and you think, oh my God, I'll have 2. If you just did that technique to switch off the attraction to the chocolate or the urge to buy it, then you would be able to walk past without having to rely on willpower. And the problem with willpower is it's a stress response. So it's feeding the old programming in the brain. So if we can use a control technique to switch off the stress response, then we've got more of a chance of being able to say to ourselves, I'm the kind of person who doesn't need chocolate that way anymore. And the more we feed that new belief system, that new wiring, that wiring over a period of repetition, over a period of time, develops enough proteins on it. So if you were looking at it under a microscope, you would see proteins developing in little shapes like bumps. And then after about 7 to 14 days, they develop into little kind of lollipop shapes. And if you then kept using that new thought, I'm the kind of person who doesn't need to use chocolate that way, after 21 to 28 days, you'd have little mushroom-shaped proteins. And if you kept using it, you would steal the proteins from the old thoughts, the old belief systems that say, I can't resist chocolate.
That's amazing. So there actually is some science behind it. And chemically, when you start to rewire your brain is actually literally rewiring itself.
Your brain is changing. It is malleable. You can change it with your thoughts, change it with your focus, change it with your emotional state as well. That's one of the ways the brain learns and why hypnosis works so well as a programming tool, because hypnosis relies upon the therapist teaching their patient how to interact with the hypnosis and and allow play acting, allow emotions, allow pretense to come along with it. And it's that emotional connection and sensate connection with it that actually produces the proteins on the neural pathways faster.
That's amazing. So how do you deal with situations where, I would imagine coming in as a client, I feel like it might be difficult to start to flip this switch. So how do you deal with people that are struggling with getting into that mindset and starting to rewire their brain?
The first thing is to give them the power, basically, to show them as many little control techniques as they possibly can so that they feel power over the urges, over the cravings, over the unhelpful thought, over the inner critic. Most people have been doing these habits or behaviors or thinking this way for so long, like I did, where I'd begun to believe and develop neural pathways. That's all a belief system is a set of neural pathways in the brain that have been used so often, they're now who you think you are.
Right.
And so that's where we lose our sense of hope. We lose our sense of control over a situation because we surrender ourselves to the fact that we're just the kind of people who can't resist chocolate, or we're just the kind of people who can't resist that extra glass of wine, or we're just the kind of people who think badly of ourselves or don't like our body, or we're always going to be overweight, or can't resist when we open the fridge. Yeah. So whatever the programming is that you've surrendered to believe is who you are, when you first learn that you have power over that thinking pattern, that it's not you. And the first thing I teach people is that every thought you have, every emotional response you have, even every sensation you have, even pain, is not who you are. It is simply wiring firing in your brain causing a chemical reaction. So if it's just wiring firing in your brain and you have ways like a light switch to switch off that wiring to stop the electrical surge moving through that wiring, you can switch off a thought, you can switch off an emotion, you can reduce the intensity of emotion, you can switch off a sensation and reduce the intensity of that too. So it puts you in kind of the driving seat for the first time sometimes in our life, where we can actually sit there and say, well, okay, if I've got a little bit of power here, what do I want to do with that power? And that's where I would teach people to use my programming audios or teach people to do mind rehearsal, which is a programming technique they can do themselves. And I would provide them with lots of rewire techniques that they can do in front of the mirror. Rewire techniques are short, sharp techniques that take a minute or two in front of the mirror, where we can just use repetition and rhythm to rewire that cerebellum part of the brain. And so it puts people in control again. And that's the first thing we need to show somebody, is that they have some semblance of control over the addiction, the habit, the belief system, so that they can start deciding what they want to program instead. A lot of the time when people feel trapped by a reaction or a habit that has been a problem for them, they feel a sense of helplessness. It's just always who I am.
Right.
But once they have a sense that there is hope, that there is the potential for change, and that they're in control of that change, that they don't have to rely on a magic pill, they don't have to rely on, 5,000 therapeutic sessions or 700 psychotherapeutic sessions. They could actually, within around anything from 63 to 126 days, which is the neuroscience of it, that takes to reprogram and rewire a new blueprint where it becomes automated, where it becomes, you're just the kind of person who can have a little bit less often. You're just the kind of person who doesn't need to do XYZ anymore. You're just the kind of person who chooses to be the healthiest version of yourself. So it's, again, having the sense and the tools of empowering somebody to know that they can do something,
right,
rather than have to rely on willpower.
So it sounds like in order to provide that power, you need to learn how to detach yourself from those thoughts and realize that, those thoughts aren't your actual self-image. I'm not an addict, or,
Yes.
that's my addiction speaking to me. I don't actually need that food.
Well, it's not even the identity of an addiction. It's just the wiring. So an addiction is a set of neural frequencies that have been used so often that they produce the same chemical response and desire for hits of dopamine. And so that pattern is just wiring too. And so I teach people how to become what I call the curious detective. So to become that observer of every thought they have when they're looking at changing something in their life, just becoming curious about what triggers the pattern, what emotional states they're in when they get triggered. Is there a particular person in their life or a particular habit in their life or a particular event or situation that is triggering a pattern of behavior? And in that first week, it's just about getting curious. It's not so much doing anything about it in the first week. Let's just get used to it and be curious about what all the patterns and the triggers are, and be that detective that can just witness our life and make a note of what's going on for ourselves. And I just teach them the curious detective model and the eye rolls to begin with, because it gives them something to focus their attention on that's moving them towards the possibility of a different future. When an urge or a craving or the impulse to do something unhelpful becomes really challenging for them, if that curious detective has started to really have an effect and they choose to use the eye rolls, it gives them 4 or 5 seconds of power to at least make a choice to walk away in that moment. And I tell them again and again, it's not as though you can't ever have it again. It's just simply less of it, less often, and using the tools to say, you know what, maybe today I don't need it.
Right. And then slowly you create a new habit, essentially.
That's correct.
So I know a lot of what you do is, working with people with, overeating and food. Why do we create such an emotional attachment with food?
Look, there are many reasons, and it's different for everyone. But if you think about food is something that we have to do. We have to eat to survive. If we think about, for a lot of people, when they grow up, food has the connotations that's attached to family. It's attached to emotional satisfaction and connection. If we think about the ways in which the brain learns through repetition and through heightened states of emotion. So for people, most things in their life that are emotionally based revolve around food. So whether it's love and family connection around the dinner table, or patterns around learned behavior about what other people in their family that they look up to, because that's another way the brain learns, is when we look up to somebody and we see them as an authority figure. If they have particular patterns, then our brain learns to mirror that, because it's about the need for connection. So again, it's an emotional need. And so food is something that we can't avoid. It's everywhere in our life. Later on in life, it becomes social. It becomes part of how we connect with our friends. It's part of how we connect socially with family still. And so it becomes one of those things that it just feels normal to do and normal to resort to in times of stress and in times of emotional, and there are positive emotional connections to food as well. It's not always just stress-based or loneliness or fear. It's also things like the need for, love and a cuddle, or a connection with a friend, and there's a yearning inside. I call it that soul hunger. And, that's a comfort. So it can be comfort eating, not just stress eating, not just anxiety or anger eating as well. There can be punishment hunger. There's so many different types of emotional hunger. And our brain has just learned, through the same way that it learns everything else, to attach food as the solution. An emptiness inside can often be fulfilled by through repetition and what we've done in the past, through a little bit of chocolate or a little bit of bread or some nice hot chips or fries or whatever it is that has become our go-to food. And I just ask people to start questioning in that space in their brain when they do the eye rolls, to ask, is this an emotional hunger or is it a genuine need for nutrition? And if it's an emotional hunger, emotional needs need to be satisfied by an emotional response, which means give ourselves a quiet inner hug, become our own best friend and coach ourselves through that. Be kind to ourselves through it, rather than be our inner critic that blames us or says, here I go again, or this is hopeless. Rather than triggering more of that stress, if we become in that curious moment our own best friend, we can coach ourselves and satisfy the emotional need, the emotional emptiness, rather than filling it with food, which we never do. Food never satisfies an emotional hunger.
Right. And you found a lot of success with teaching these techniques to people that are struggling and emotional eaters, right? They've lost a lot of weight.
Yes, absolutely. Well, not everybody that is an emotional eater needs to lose weight or wants to lose weight, but one of the helpful side effects, if you like, of changing your relationship with food and eating for nutrition rather than eating for soul comfort and eating for emotional comfort. One of the helpful side effects is that people do tend to lose a few pounds. So, we've had everything from the odd person that has 5 to 10 pounds that they're constantly yo-yoing all their lives finally overcome that. And we've had others right up to, a beautiful Trish that was on the Sunrise Morning Show program with me, where she'd lost and dealt with this all her life for many, many decades. She gained and lost over 120 pounds 3 times in her life and just kept yo-yoing through that cycle. And she lost 50 kilos in Australian terms, but that's, over 120 pounds permanently, and she now works with me actually 7 or so years later. She's kept the weight off. She feels fantastic. She's now one of my key mentors on the programs we do.
Wow. How does it make you feel going from, your struggles early on to now helping all these other people? How does it make you feel when you see people make these changes?
It moves me to tears. It's just, I feel so grateful that I've been given the opportunity to get through this, to the adversity that, some people would see as, poor you. For me, the stroke, I had kidney failure as part of the disease. I had, so many different layers where I could have died through this process. Even the depression for me, they were gifts for me to try and wake up, for me to tap into what every human being has, which is a potential to make the world a better place, the potential to do their little bit to influence whoever they can to be a better version of themselves as well. It's joyous. I just love seeing that light that goes on in people's eyes when they get that they are powerful, that they have control over their thoughts, their habits, their behaviors, their growth.
And how do you feel yourself now that, you went from early on, you were struggling with depression and anxiety, and now that, you've been able to master a lot of these techniques and you're training with other people, how has that changed your life?
Oh, my life is so different is a word that doesn't even come anywhere near how my life is now. I get to travel the world and help people. I get to look in the mirror and like who I am every morning and be proud of who I am and be able to see that in others, see them develop that ability to stand up and look at themselves and know that they are worthy of whatever their little part in the world is. And for me, I can't even compare my life where it was in my teens and 20s and 30s to where it is now in my early 50s. As I said before, it's like, at 39, I had the opportunity to be reborn. And for me, my life is softer. It's more gentle. I'm more gentle on myself. I'm more gentle with others as well. I had so many expectations of myself that were, I was a perfectionist. I had the wiring of all of that really drove me in my early teens, 20s and 30s. And for me now, I'm a woman that seeks excellence, but I am happy with who I am right now. And I accept that mistakes are there to learn from, adversity is there to learn from, and I allow that in because I can't learn and grow without it. For me, when I was sick in the past, or if I was I'd made a promise that I was going to lose 10 kilos and I failed. If I made a promise I wasn't going to eat chocolate anymore and I found myself doing so or secret eating again, I'd blame myself and it would just snowball again and keep going back in the old patterns. Whereas now, if I make a mistake in my life, it's, okay, what can I learn from this experience? It's a totally different approach to life. And how can I learn and grow from this? How can I find a better way of being tomorrow?
Do you think you reached your full potential?
Oh, of course not. We're all evolving and growing for our entire life, and our brain can do that. You know, the old science used to believe that our brain was static after the age of around 18 to 21, and that then our neural pathways declined after that. Whereas, you know, all the latest science shows that our brain can learn and grow right till the day that we stop breathing. Our brain is still capable of learning something new. For me, I just devour, knowledge and wisdom, and devour new learnings, new techniques, new strategies. So there's always something to learn. And I learn something new from every client that I treat as well. And the day that I stop learning is the day that I won't be breathing anymore.
That's a good answer. Where can people connect with you that would like to either reach out to you on social media, or they'd like to maybe check out your website and check out some of your programs?
Sure. Facebook is Maggie Wilde, the Potentialist. So if you go to facebook.com/Maggie Wilde author, I think my actual URL is, domain is. Also, they can get, if they really would like to see how the CPR brain training program works, they can actually get a free starter kit on one of my websites called Mind Potential Academy. If they go to the mindpotentialacademy.com, you will see there, if you go to the free tab, I think it's free kits or free something, freebies, I think it is. If they go to the freebies tab, you'll see they can register for a CPR kit. So it's a sample CPR kit on, I think it's Sweet Cravings is there. I change it quite regularly. But right now I think there's a Sweet Cravings CPR kit. So they'll get a control strategy, a program strategy, so a program self-hypnosis if they like. They can use that as they drift off to sleep at the night time. And then a rewire audio where they can use techniques just through repetition, where they can lie back and listen to that as well. I think I've put a cardio version as well where they can go for a walk to it with a cardio beat as well. So that would be at mindpotentialacademy.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to get those links from you and add them into the show notes so my guests can check out your website. I have two final questions for you. Mm-hmm. The first is, and you talked about this a little bit, but what is your definition of adversity and what does it mean to you?
Adversity for me means growth. It means I have a challenge and I'm about to learn from this experience. Adversity for me is a chance to become a better version of myself, that I'm going to learn something about myself or how the world works or how I'm interacting with the world.
I like that answer.
Adversity used to be something I dreaded because I had so much of it in my life. And it used to be a belief system that I would, if something else went wrong in my day, even if I stubbed my toe in the morning as I got up, there would be this kind of doom and gloom feeling in my brain and my body where I would kind of, it would be a physical experience where there'd be a thought that would say, oh, here it goes again, another bad day. And then my body would sag and then my brain would sag and then I'd end up in pain or something would be going on that would trigger symptoms of the autoimmune. Whereas now it's a chance for me to learn from something. It's something that uplifts me and my body feels ready for a challenge or ready for an experience of growth.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing, how before, and I have the similar situation where, someone cutting me off or your example, stubbing your toe in the morning, that would kind of just set you off for a rest of the bad day. But now it's a little bit different where those little things just they don't bother you like they used to.
No, absolutely. And there's a reason why our brains snowball the way that they do, because the latest science shows that whatever you are focusing on for a period of 68 seconds or more, which isn't a very long time at all, whatever other neural pathways are attached to that thought process that you have or that emotion that you're experiencing, all other neural connections that are attached to it will fire within a 68-second period. So neural pathways, say we have a thought process that says, oh, today's going to be a bad day. And we get up in the morning and that's what our thought focus is as we get up, because we're tired, we don't wake up with energy and vitality, and our brain goes into that spiral. By the time we, say, prepare for the morning or we get out of the shower, if we've been thinking that thought and holding that even unconsciously for more than a minute or two, by the time we get out of the shower, every other neural pathway that's associated with you feeling bad about yourself, expectations of failure, expectations of another bad day, expectations of disaster, all the evidence that your brain has that today is going to be a bad day will have wired and fired, because those neural pathways wire and fire together. So like neural pathways attract like neural pathways, and they wire and fire together. So the same process happens. If you were to just stub your toe and then roll your eyes one way, blink 3 times and roll them back the other way, and interrupt that unhelpful thought, the instant response, and replace it with, you know what, that's the bad stuff over. Today's going to be a fantastic day. And you focus with emotion, sensation, and joy, and activate memories of great days, and consciously do this. Within 68 seconds, all the neural pathways associated with confidence, happiness, positivity, overcoming challenge, all of that wires and fires together as well. So whatever you put your attention on is what you're going to get more of. Your brain just simply says, yes, how can I serve you? If you say, I'm useless, hopeless, within 68 seconds, every thought that's about you not liking who you are will have wired and fired. But if you interrupt that and say, I'm learning to like and accept myself, then every other neural pathway will fire that says, I'm learning to be confident, I'm growing and learning, I'm learning to like myself. All of that activates.
I think it's important that you mentioned that it only takes 68 seconds, because I feel like that makes it a little bit simpler to change your thinking. Because if you can just, for 68 seconds, just stop and try to rewire or try to adjust your thought process, then it can completely change your behavior.
And your emotional state, everything.
Right.
Because your thoughts trigger the drug dealer part of your brain to produce the neurochemicals to make you feel the emotion that you feel. And then the emotions trigger your thoughts in the same way. So that spiral gets interrupted when you become that curious detective. For 68 seconds, make a conscious effort to interrupt the unhelpful wiring, and remember that it is all just wiring. You can choose the wiring that you feed.
That's amazing. Wow. So my last question is, what are 3 tips that you could give someone who is facing challenges right now? And I think this one is a great tip for anybody trying to change their day.
Yeah. Definitely the 68-second technique of just remembering that it's not who you are. Whatever reaction you're going through right now, you can either choose to allow it to spiral into something worse, or choose to allow yourself the chance to learn and grow from it. That remembering that it's not who you are, whatever you are going through right now, whatever experience you have or habit you have, whatever reaction you're experiencing, you can either choose to allow it to define you as a victim, or choose to allow it to define you as a person who is seeking growth. The second tip, of course, is to be that curious detective, to allow yourself to just witness for 1 week, just witness all of the unhelpful reactions that you have in your life, all of the unhelpful triggers, and just make a note of them. Let's get curious. We don't even need to do anything right now, but we can't change what we don't know. And when we start witnessing all of the little things that are happening in our life that do trigger us into having unhelpful thinking patterns that tend to snowball, then when we become aware of them, it puts us in a position to start using some of these tools. And honestly, the tip of the day is blink 3 times, roll your eyes one way and roll them the other. At any time during the day where something has happened or you notice yourself snowballing into an unhelpful state, use that technique to just put a little bit of power back into your hands.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible tip, and I can't wait to. I know I tried it earlier when you when you first mentioned it, and it certainly worked. I got rid of the thought that was in my head, and I can't wait to continue to use it next time I have a certain craving or a certain thought that I shouldn't be having.
And even the language around shouldn't and couldn't and wouldn't, that is going to trigger the part of your brain that has been wired from the age of 2 to not like being told what to do. So another tip that I would suggest to people is be aware of their language around have to, should do, and change it to choose to. Just change or get to. The brain has been wired from the age of 2 to 5 to feel excited and look forward to when we use the language of choose to and get to. So I get to go on holiday, I get to go away on spring break. Whereas when we're told we have to or we should to, it will always trigger the wiring that is firing and wiring together for feeling resentful, feeling like we have to activate willpower, we have to resist.
Yeah, it's important what words play in our thoughts.
Because all words are just neural pathways firing in our brain, triggering a chemical response. And the chemical response is either helpful or not helpful.
Right. It's so amazing how powerful our brains are, and really how much control we have once we actually start to learn how to obtain that power.
Absolutely. We are amazing, amazing, amazing human beings. And we don't even realize how powerful we are.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for what you've been able to overcome in your earlier years, and then obviously overcoming the stroke, and then finding a way to start to rewire your neural pathways, and then also finding a greater purpose and finding the potential out of everybody else and everything that you're doing with your courses, and coming on interviews like this to teach people methods to change their lives and change their thoughts. So thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, it is my pleasure. The more people know that they have power to redefine who they think they are, I just think I'm living my purpose. So I'm grateful for every opportunity to be able to help just even one person.
If you're interested in learning more about Maggie and the things that we discussed on the show today, then head over to the show notes at laughatadversity.com/13. There you can find all of the links to her website, to her courses, and her social media accounts. Also, if you like today's show, then make sure you head over to iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or your podcast player, subscribe, and leave a rating and review. That's the easiest way for the podcast to be found by others and help change their lives.